Okay, so this is going to be as fast as I can make it, hopefully. A bit of a crash course in how to use the audio filters in OBS. Now, uh, you know how you have like a video source and you can go to filters and you can add a green screen and stuff. Basically, you can do the same thing with audio devices. You get on the little cog, you go filters, and you get this. You probably won't have anything in here if you've just started. Now this is my chain of effects. I've got a compressor. I call it pre-compressor because it on here because it goes before everything else. But basically, it's a compressor, noise suppression, noise gate, and a VST plugin. So when you go on here, add, you've got gain, which is just a flat boost, compressor, noise gate, suppression, and VST plugin. VST plugins are basically like little audio plugins. So normally you'd have like, I know there are like other plugins for specifically for OBS, but these are specifically these are general audio plugins. You'll get them in like other pieces of audio software. I think you can install them in stuff like Audacity and that sort of thing. But what OBS has done is they've added support for you being able to use them in OBS. So you can add stuff like pitch shifters. I haven't found any pitch shifters that actually are stable in OBS, unfortunately, yet. But the main one that I'm using here that helps a lot is a graphical EQ. I'm just going to go over what each of these does and why I've done what I've done, and hopefully that will give you an idea of how to get your own setup sorted, because everything on your setup is probably not going to be the same as mine. It varies from microphone to microphone, mixer to mixer, so on and so forth. Like your setup's going to be slightly different, but this is a sort of good starting point at least. I should probably show you what it sounds like with all of them off first. So that's what the audio sounds like without any of the effects. As you can tell, a lot of hissing in the background. Problem number one. Voice doesn't sound quite as good. If I stop talking completely, you still hear stuff. You still hear hissing. If I click my mouse, you can hear that. And if I clack on the keyboard, you can hear that. But yeah, those are the main problems with the sound. And then if I turn them all back on, that's no hissing in the background. Yay. Better sound quality. If I click the mouse, you only hear it if I'm talking. Same with the keyboard. Yeah, so that's what those effects do. So I'm gonna go through these one by one. I'll turn like them off and on, show you what they each do. So pre-compressor. A compressor basically takes every adjustment so in terms of your audio, it comes into OBS as a waveform, and everything above a certain point in volume, what it does is, so you got your threshold. That is the threshold at which the actual compression effect will kick in. So if it's louder than this amount, so if it's like minus 14 decibels from the point where it will clip, it will actually kick in the compression. The ratio is how much it gets compressed by. Now, what does this mean? Well, basically, think of your waveform like the audio waveform as a sort of graph where it's got a peak and a middle point and a low point. So it goes like that. And if it's above the point where it would where the compression would kick in, so you've got this other point up here, which is where it's going to peak or clip. Everything in between there will basically get squashed down by 32 times. If you've got it set to 32 like I have. So a change in volume of 1 decibel above that point would actually be a 32th, I think. I don't know if that's how you say it, but 1 over 32 of a decibel, and 32 decibels of change in volume will result in 1 decibel of change. The reason why mine is so aggressive and I've got it set all the way up to 32 is because I want to avoid peaks from doing stupid shit like this. Because if I do that, it doesn't clip. Whereas if I turn it off, it will that would clip. And the reason why that's particularly bad is because I'm using noise suppression specifically after it, or like I'm using noise suppression in general. If I didn't have this here, then noise suppression would sound great for eliminating the hiss in the background. But the problem is, if I turn it off and I do that again, and that crackling that you hear when I do that is because of the way that noise suppression works. It adds and removes values based on it like gathers information on based on you let it listen to the sound of the hiss, and then it goes, okay, well I know what that sounds like, so I'll just add and remove values from that little waveform, to correct that. The reason why you hear that crackling is because it's still adding and removing stuff, even though it's already clipping. So you end up with this crackling sound, and it's really not very nice. So you need a pre-compressor before that to eliminate any potential clips from banging the mic or whatever. So that when you bang the mic, not only does it not clip in the first place, which is the best part about it, but also you don't end up with the crackling, specifically caused by noise suppression. Now, what does noise suppression do? The best way for me to show you that is actually, I can leave the GEQ on, but I'll turn off the noise gate. So if I stop talking, you might hear a slight bit of background noise, but it's a lot better than without the noise suppression on. So if I turn the noise suppression off, it really cuts down that sort of noise floor. And that's great for when it's also doing that when I'm talking. So it's not just doing it when there's nothing going on, it's doing it right now while I'm talking, which makes my voice a lot clearer, makes everything nicer. You don't have to listen to the hiss in the background. So that's what that does. Basically, what you want to do is you want to start it at like nothing, and then adjust it until you find that about the point where the hiss is at like a level where you're not really getting any reasonable amount of reduction for reducing it any further. I find that 40 is about where mine is because my computer fans are pretty loud. But yeah, that's about the level that you're going to want to play around with this, depending on your setup, depending on how much noise you have in your room, how loud your computer is, how good your mic is at isolating the rest of that. You're going to want to play with this. But that being said, starting at minus 40, not a bad choice. If you go below there, I think it can start like, it's sort of diminishing returns, but it can also start having some kind of artifacty sounds. How loud they are is they're not very loud anyway. But it's better to stop at that point when you start getting diminishing returns, because otherwise it can mess with the sound and reduce the sound quality slightly. Next one, noise gate. Noise gate is basically when you stop talking or the mic stops hearing anything above a certain level, it shuts off completely and mutes the whole thing. So it's like auto voice detection, really. It'll unmute you when it hears you talking. And that's what gets rid of, if I turn it back on, stuff like the mouse click. Then if I talk, you can might be able to hear that in the background. It's quite quiet anyway. But if I'm mashing my keyboard, you can probably hear that. But you can't hear it when I'm not talking because of the noise gate. You probably want to set this to think of some kind of, if you play games where you click a lot on the mouse, you might want to use that. Or you might just want to set it to, if there's not that much, if you're not that worried about keyboard and mouse sounds, you might want to set it to the level of whenever you speak, however loudly, to get it to kick in, you just set it right to that. It's one of those things where you've got to play around with it, especially based on your mic volume as well. But if you turn your mic volume down, you're going to need to adjust this. If you turn your mic volume up, you're going to need to adjust this. But yeah, I've got it. So in terms of how it works, I've got mine set up so that the close threshold is minus 32 dB. So what that means is if the loudness of the signal goes below 32 decibels, it's going to shut off and completely mute. Open threshold is 28 dB, so it means that the second it hears something above 28 decibels, or minus 28 decibels rather, from the point where it would clip, it will then turn on. Your open threshold should probably always be louder, but louder means less minus. It's kind of weird, but basically you can see what I mean. The 28 is less than 32, therefore this should always be less than that, right? Just because otherwise it can open and then immediately decide that it would close, whereas I think you get what I'm talking about with that. Anyway, attack time is set to 25 milliseconds. Attack time is the speed at which it sort of fades in, so it doesn't just instantly turn it on the second that it detects the open threshold. What it actually will do is it will fade in slightly, so it'll give it a couple of, in this case, 25 milliseconds, which is a really short time, but it stops any kind of audio artifacting from just instantly going to full. Hold time is the minimum amount of time that it will stay open. This is sort of good for, I don't know, brief pauses in speech to keep it open for a little bit, or just brief pauses between words. In this case, it's not very long, which is fine. But it needs to be, you know, I'd say, I think these are the default values actually, and the default values work for me, so I'd say just leave them at default. But I'm going to tell you what they do anyway, just because I know. Release time is how long it takes to fade back out again after you stop talking. So that's set to 150 milliseconds. Yeah. So that's noise gate. Actually, did I tell you what? I think the attack and release, I can't remember if I actually told you what these do. I only mentioned a ratio and threshold, I just realized. But yeah, attack and release on these exactly the same, basically. It's just how fast it kicks in. In this case, I've set it to 1 on my pre-compressor, just because I needed to kick in immediately the second it hears that slap on the mic. And release, I've set to slightly, you know, slower so that it eases off. But still quite quick. 12 milliseconds is next to nothing. It's just not instantaneous. As for output gain, that would only be used if, because compressors, I'm using it as a sort of soft limiter instead of a hard limiter, but what it's usually used for is so that if I'm screaming and having a fun time, it won't clip, it'll bring the volume down, but if I'm whispering, it will sort of bring the volume up. You use output gain to raise your whispering to an acceptable volume, so then everything else would clip, but then you use the compression to bring everything else back down so that the difference between you whispering and you screaming is actually not that much in terms of actual volume for the listener. So it's sort of, it makes that slightly, you know, better to listen to over the course of a whole stream, because, you know, obviously not having a sudden extremely loud sound would be nice. So yeah, it's good for that. I don't use it for that personally, because I find that mine works fine without it, and I get this weird sort of ringing sound when it fades out afterwards. But I'd say pre-compressor, definitely essential if you're going to use noise suppression. But as for actually using the compressor as a compressor, like somewhere later in the chain, if you were going to use it for the normal thing, you'd probably use it just after noise gate, I'd say, just before the graphical EQ. But yeah, I don't personally use it for that. All right, graphical EQ. Graphical EQ is actually, it's one of these VST plugins that OBS recently added support for, and it's actually not built into OBS. This overtone GEQ is actually a download from here. It's a free VST plugin, and it's just an equalizer. What that means is it takes various different frequencies in the sound of the signal and amplifies certain ones and reduces certain other ones. So if I turn it off, you can hear that it's slightly, you know, more tinny. Basically what I've done with it is, in my case, I've configured it to have slightly more bass and the lower ones to make it sound slightly, people call it warmer, but I just like the way it sounds basically. And I've reduced the highs slightly to get rid of, like, reduce the mouse clicking sound slightly when I'm talking. Play around with them, because obviously your mic is going to pick up the frequencies initially from you speaking differently, or you're going to prefer a different sound, or your mic is just going to react differently. This is what can really make a really crappy, like, £5 microphone sound more like a 20 to, you know, £40 microphone, and a £50 microphone sound like 100, so on and so forth. That being said, don't overdo it with the bass and stuff. Like, it sounds a bit kind of weird if you, like, super pump it up. With all of these, I'd say use it sort of sparingly, you know, be reasonable with it. But at the same time, once you get used to tuning it a bit, you can make your mic sound a lot better than you would expect for however much you paid for it. Right, so yeah, what you need to do to install this is, if you're using the 64-bit version of OBS, you take Win64 VST. So you download that if you're using the 64-bit version, that if you're using the 32-bit version. You extract the download, and my computer is freezing. There we go. Program files. You go to, if you're going on, if you're on a 62-bit OS, you also, if you're not if you're on a 62-bit OS, if you're running 64-bit version of OBS, because there's a 64-bit version and a 32-bit version, you need to put it in program files / BST plugins. And it must be, the folder must be named exactly like that, otherwise it doesn't work. Because it looks for a very specific folder, so no spaces, exact same case, has to be. And then Voxengo is the folder that you will get inside of the download with overtone geq.dll. You could actually just put the DLL just in this folder, and it would detect it just fine, but I just extract the folder and put it in. And if you're using the 32-bit version of OBS for whatever reason, say you've got some webcam driver that only works on 32-bit, then you would need the exact same name, but in 32-bit, in program files 32, or x86 rather. But yeah, so that's where 32-bit will look for. And that's it. And then after that, you restart OBS, assuming like you probably wouldn't have it running whilst you're doing that. Where am I looking for? I'm looking for this. And then it should just show up in this menu the next time you start OBS. And you click Open Plugin Interface to configure it. Probably want to like save. I think you can save your presets somehow. Yeah, you click Presets, and then just click this little save, and then you can save your preset to somewhere. Like I've saved mine to my documents, overtone GEQ OBS .cpf. That's the profile file, whatever. And yeah, that. And then if this ever resets or your OBS gets nuked, you can just load it back up. I think I don't remember if I actually covered it before, but I think it's pretty obvious. The order of these does matter, because it goes from top to bottom. Because if I put these, I'll show you what happens if I put these in the wrong order. Well, I mean, if I put pre-compressor after noise suppression, then I think you'd still get the crackling, but it would just be less loud. I don't know what that sounds like, unfortunately, because I'm not listening to this. One thing you can do in your setup, I'm going to do it right now. You might hear a bit of echo because these headphones do leak a bit of sound. But if you want to listen to this as you're tweaking it, you go to right-click, Advanced Audio Properties, and under here you've got your microphone, and it's got audio monitoring. You go to Monitor Only. Sorry, no, not Monitor Only. I think is Monitor Only. Yeah, or Monitor Only, or Monitor and Output. And now you can probably hear my voice. I'm going to turn that off because that's screwing my brain, but you can probably hear it twice with a slight delay. But if it's you, you'll just be hearing your own voice speaking and your voice fed back to you in your headphones. I think it will be on a slight delay, so it can be a bit speech jammery depending on your computer. But yeah, then you can listen to your voice as you're tweaking these settings, which can be very useful for tweaking them and knowing what the hell you're doing. That should be everything. You can also, one other note, with the VST plugins thing, you can get other VSTs from this website. I'll put this link in the description, the link to this specific one, but you can get other effects from here, such as, you know, pitch changes and shifters and all this voice effects, so you can make yourself sound like a robot or like in an echoey hall. And those effects are cool, although that being said, I don't know if they're necessarily as stable as overtone GEQ. I know that overtone is stable from what I've used of it. It's not crashed or had any issues. I know that other ones have a lot of issues, and they're really pissy and they will crash all the time. Other ones just straight up don't work. You just press open plugin interface, doesn't do anything. So yeah, feel free to play with them as much as you want, but this one is one that I know works, so I'd recommend it. Yeah, I think that's it. Alright, well, have a good one, and let me know in the comments if you want to see any more videos like this, or anything else in OBS that you want covered, or want me to show you anything else about the setup, like the green screen effects, or the webcam, or something. Because I'm totally willing to do those as well. Yeah, have a good one.